吉美钦哲仁波切to grant us teachings and guidance, and may we listen to the Dharma with sincere faith, deepen our right view, increase our wisdom and merit, and together share in the joy of Dharma. Let's welcome吉美钦哲仁波切.
Good evening. I don't know how you say good evening is fairly. Is it going to be translated? Yes? Okay. All right. So, thank you very much for such an elaborate welcome and beautiful music. Was it called Turkish Delight? Was it? Turkish March. Okay. Life. Anyway, it was delightful. So, why am I here? A few weeks ago, I got a message from Kennedy asking to meet, and of course we haven't spent much time with each other, but I know that he's an avid follower of Jesus Richard, and that was enough for me to want to meet Ken Richard. Other than that, I think, as the English saying goes, neither of us know each other from afar or so. But also, Ken Richard told me that he had translated The Enlightened Vagabond into Tibetan, and The Enlightened Vagabond, which is Padrinchik's anecdotes of Padrinchik's life collected by one of my Dharma siblings, I suppose. Nature Card was a tribute of both my father, Kanjun Nichin, and Dimitri's Nichin. Of course, we have had the fortune of you in the presence and receiving teaching from and many others, but mainly we spent the most time. So, most of the time we have had the fortune of spending time in Gapchiku's Revision. So, I know Matthew used to run around with a tape recorder, recording anecdotes, stories, asking questions. And as a result of that, one of them was this beautiful and insightful book about Buddhism called Enlightened. So, this book, The Enlightened Vagabond, of course, it is like a biography, like a storybook. So, in one sense, it's very easily accessible for most of us. Just reading it gives us a sense of what Buddhism was, but mainly what teachers of the calendar of Buddhism, how they lived, how they are. In my case, these teachers, my teachers like Deputy Rinpoche, Deputy Rinpoche, they were, of course, of the lineage of Badu Rinpoche, but at the same time, I think they were, in my case, in my opinion, of the same caliber of Badu Rinpoche. You might think, how am I able to judge that? Actually, I'm not able to judge that myself. Like everyone, as I was growing up, my reference was my parents, my mother, my father. These two great teachers, my Deputy Rinpoche, Deputy Rinpoche, I trust them, I trusted them, I met them because of my father, whose name was known as Ganju Rinpoche. Literally, the word Ganju is the Tibetan for translated words, meaning the words of the Buddha. There's over 100 volumes of the teachings of the Buddha, recorded teaching of the Buddha, translated into Tibetan. By no means can I say that that is all the Buddha taught. Just what was recorded and translated into Tibetan. We cannot say that the Buddha's teaching is limited to 100 volumes. And it's not just 100 volumes with one page. Each of these volumes were consisting of over 400 or 500 pages. And the length of these pages were at least an arrow's length. Really, really a lot that the Buddha had taught and was recorded into Tibetan. Some of these, why I'm saying this, is that some of these were translated or brought into the human realm from the Nagas, from other realms, which means that there in this case so many more how the Buddha taught. And these were translated into Tibetan through tremendous hardship by Tibetan translators in the 8th century. And then later on, I suppose, published. And my father, like many, many teachers in the past, would read them. There is this tradition in Tibet where there's a read-on transmission, an uninterrupted reading transmission. And so my father would receive them. And he read this so many times. I was told that he had read it at least 35 times. He had given the reading transmission of about 15 times. But then as a reading for himself, he read it about 35 times. That's why he got this name, Ganju Rinpoche, because he read the translated teachings of the Buddha. Imagine being called translated teachings of the Buddha. That was his name. So he was my father, and he was a disciple of a great Tibetan master called吉美钦哲仁波切. And that was one of his teachers. One of his teachers was another great master called Nibbana Rinpoche. Those two were my father's teachers. So how I met my other two teachers, Deputy Rinpoche and Deputy Rinpoche, is through his connection with teachers. My father shared with Gyaltsab Rinpoche as one of their root teachers, Gyaltsab Rinpoche, and with Gyaltsab Rinpoche, as close connection with the So those are one of the reasons how I had the fortune of meeting my teachers, the most precious teachers, like both of these teachers of my father were students of吉美钦哲仁波切. My father's root teacher, Jirun had spent quite a few years with吉美钦哲仁波切. Also, he did a couple of years retreat as assistant of吉美钦哲仁波切. So that is how we have his connection with the Kinsidanese. So that is how I feel I can say with confidence that my teachers, like David Njungasi, their students were of the same caliber as Badrujimit. You might say that's been simply because of what you believe, the bias of your fathers, and that's true. It is my bias that makes me feel that these teachers were like Badrujimit. Also, the time I spent with them.
Are you feeling hot?
I'm not hot, baby. When I was growing up, I used to have to read do a lot of reading, and amongst them it was reading Guru Rinpoche's life story, in which it describes how many in how many different realms there are different manifestations of Guru Rinpoche benefiting beings. And in some of those realms, everything is complete opposite of where we live, where everything is non-toxic, beautiful. Everything is of jewels, where nothing but jewels are seen and talked about, where it says even the sound and the concept of ordinary stones are never heard. And at that time when I was reading it, it sounded like reading a fantasy story, or like a fairy tale. I didn't disbelieve it, but it had the same feel to me as when I used to read fairy tales. Like many children, I used to believe in fairy tales. I used to believe that if a frog was kissed, that it could become a prince. Or is it a princess? I don't know. Whatever it is. And I used to believe that. But now when I look back, with the time I spent with I think I spent most time with even more than my father. Because after my father passed away, I spent many, many years with when I was with my father, and I was with Kinzermitten, and later on with Trushiyunitten. They were the norm to me. It felt like this is how it is. And in that respect, I think I took it for granted what they were. I just felt that this is the result of, this is what must be known. Their behavior, their way of doing things. But now when I look back, now I realize that actually when I was with them, things were really like being in a jewel island, where at that time, even the concept of ordinary stone was not real at that time. Everything was jewel, everything was diamond, everything was ruby, sapphire. Just being with them. That is why I was saying that these teachers, were of the same caliber as Bhadramachan. When I read this enlightened vagabond, it actually felt like the time I spent with so matter of fact, so natural. Now to demonstrate that, I'd like to tell a very short story of my father. I used to ask, as a child, my father for stories because when I was growing up in Darjeeling, we didn't have this. Because these days, you don't need anybody to tell your stories. You just look into here and you hear a lot of, what is it called? Fairy tales. But everybody is telling each other. So we did have that. So I used to ask my father stories, my mother for stories. And they wouldn't tell me stories all the time. But every year I used to have a toothache. And at that time I would get stories to distract me from toothaches. When we were growing up, dentists weren't really dentists. Because I know when my father went to a dentist, the dentist was paid by the tooth he had extracted. So he had extracted almost all my father's teeth. So when I had a toothache, I didn't get taken to the dentist. I'd get some time off. And my mother would tell me stories, and my father would tell me stories to distract me. And that really worked. The mother used to tell me stories of herself, how she got inspired to practice. And my father also, I used to ask him, how, tell me stories about yourself. And then he used to tell stories about his teachers, Jenoran Bachiri, and many others. And I asked him how he met Jenoran Bachiri and how was his life with his parents. And he said that as he was a child, his father had passed away and his mother decided to stay or live with somebody else. I think was somebody related to his father. And then that was the archetypical, what is it called, stepfather or stepmother kind of experience he had. My father, I think, was quite precocious as a child, and he was really interested in learning. As he was asking his stepfather for teaching, the stepfather was quite annoyed at him for wanting to study because his own son didn't really want to study and also wasn't very bright. So any time my father wanted to study, he would get punished. So he told me the punishment that he had received. He said that he would be tied up to a pole and left outside at night. And he said that that was a very frequent occurrence. And then he said sometimes, to make it more spicy, he would light some chivy and then put it underneath where he was tied upside down. And I asked him, what did you do at that time? He said, I was really sad. I was really upset. And he said that he made a decision that he had to become free from this cycle of existence. And his determination, he said, started at that time. And then from that moment on, he was looking for his teacher. Now, why I'm saying this is that, as I told you earlier, when I was spending time with them, everything that they did seemed so natural, so normal. And I thought that was normal to have that kind of thought when you were abused, that you want to become free from some sorrow. But now when I look back, that wasn't normal. That was really like something so precious, like a jewel. At that time, I thought that was normal to have that wish to become free from the cycle of existence. In fact, and so at that time, he had that determination, and then he went, he learned how to read, and in the Tibetan culture, there is this custom of getting the people to read the sutras for the benefit of the lay people. So he would go and read a Pachaparmita, the different sutras, and then he would be given a few bags of grain, and he had saved up quite a lot of grains, I suppose, enough to go and look for a teacher and then do some practice. So he said that after he was doing this, he decided that now he was going to save that and to look for a teacher. Then he heard some of his fellow readers that they were going to go and meet this teacher called Jiddu Rinpoche. His another name is Champanjukdu, Karma Maitrikaran. So he decided to go with them to meet this teacher. And they said, well, you can come, but we don't want to be held down by you. So if you can catch us up on the horse, you're welcome to follow me. He was, I think, about 7 or 8 years old. So he said he ran after their horse and then met Jirumanache, who was camped somewhere. So when he met him there, as he went into the tent, he was just a little scruffy little boy. And he said he went straight to Jirumanache. He didn't need any introduction. He looked at it at his fellow friends as if asking for an introduction, but they told him, no, you came yourself, you seek out yourself. They said they wouldn't introduce him. And then Jiddu overheard him then and said, you people don't need to introduce us. We have met since many, many lifetimes. So he went straight to him and he asked him, can I please be your disciple? I want to be free. And he said, as long as you can finish the preliminaries, that which is taught by Patrick, for example, in the words of a perfect teacher, he said, then you can follow him. He said he was overjoyed. He ran back. He said he was so happy he could hardly feel the ground under his feet. He felt like he was walking on cloud. he went straight home to his mother and asked her, "Can you please roast and grind these grains so that I can go into retreat?" She accepted. She decided to do that. Once she had made, roasted and ground it, my father said that the roasted sampan was confiscated by his stepfather. It really sounds like a fairy tale. Confiscated, and he said, "Child life, you will not do retreat. You will go and waste precious commodity. So you're not doing it." So then again, he said he went out and asked for people if he could go and read for them so he could get some more grains. So he managed, but he said not as much as before. So it wasn't enough. So then he asked his mother, what can he do? She said, "I will pawn my turquoise." In that area, turquoises were very, very prized wealth. So she pawned her turquoise and then got a loan of a few bags of tamba. So then he ran off to do retreat. But because of his father's confiscation, he was a little bit late. So he got stuck in his cave, and it was snowed up. He couldn't go home. So towards the end, he survived on one spoonful of tamba every day and some snow, with the intense joy of getting to meet his teacher, but knew that he couldn't meet him unless he had finished his preliminaries. So in a couple of months, he finished his preliminaries. And he said towards the end, because he was doing prostrations every day too, he used to feel faint. He'd fainted a few times, but he still kept doing. There are other stories too, but that's not for today, during that time. So anyway, after that, we went straight to see his teacher. When I was listening to those stories, it felt like it was something very natural to do. But of course, for us, me in particular, so swept by modern amenities, let alone survive with one spoonful of tamba a day. Even if I had a 5-course meal every day, being able to turn my mind to becoming free from susaba is very, very high order. Do I even wish to be free from samsara? That's a really big question. Do I even think samsara is something that I should be free from? But when I was listening to these stories, I thought that was the most normal and natural thing. And then spending time with everything he did was so naturally just to benefit others. There was not a slightest moment of insecurity, of fear of discomfort. When he used to teach, flies would land on him, and he didn't seem to be bothered. Wherever the flies landed on him, he would just let it be. Wherever mosquitoes landed on him, sometimes they would just look. And I used to feel quite content in being the fly chaser. But it didn't seem to mind the flies landing around him. The literal flies and the figurative flies, like myself, that were around him. It didn't seem to mind. Whatever time anybody wanted to come to meet me, he was ready. If somebody were to come and see him and were allowed to, at midnight, he would be ready to give teachings, to help them. I took that to be something non-natural. It wasn't until I came to the West that the idea of appointment was something. People would just turn up to seek and admit at any odd hour. I remember being woken up many, many times, like 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, because I used to sleep next to my father. He would be brought out to see sick people, dying people. And there was not the slightest sign of thinking, how come at this hour I should be woken up? But I feel actually was the jewel island that I was living in. And now, when I see myself, I can see what an arid desert I'm living in, surrounded by myself, my insecurities, my preconceived ideas. So that's why I'm saying that these teachers were like Patricia. They didn't have the concept of me time. These teachers, like Deputy Jerome, and Jerusalem, I feel that, in my opinion, they were of the same caliber as Adrupison, because I think they had the same setting. Do you understand what I mean by them at the same setting? Their programming was caught into the same setting. And I remember once, when I was traveling with Captain Kizir, usually every day, we used to go and eat greets from in the morning, and he used to give us all some blessed pills. And one day, I went into Rinpoche's room. It was after the cremation of the 16th Kamapa. I was traveling with him, and it was in Delhi. I went up early morning, paid my respect. I wouldn't talk until about 9 o'clock. He would be doing his recitations. And then when I went there, he looked quite sad. I could see tears in his eyes. And then after a while, I sat there. Then he started to sob. He was really crying like a little child. And I knew Rinpoche wasn't talking at that time. So I took the pills that Rinpoche gave me very kindly. And then I went back after 9 o'clock. And then Rinpoche was having his breakfast. And then I asked him, why was somebody crying? After a while, he said, today, one of the Kamapa's main attendants passed away. And I said, you want sobbing during the Kamapa's cremation? And he passed away. Why are you crying about his one of his assistants? He said, Kalapa passed away, and he had his students, his assistants, continue his activities for the sake of essential beings. And now his assistant suddenly passed away, and there's nobody to continue that. And then that's why he was crying. Again, one would think, oh, that's very, something very normal. But to me, that was, which is compassion for the sentient beings who would have continued to benefit from those particular activities of the Karmapa. He must have felt that those were not going to be continued. And that's why he was crying. That's why my teacher was worried, crying. It wasn't for any personal reasons. It was just sorrow. I should say it was a cosmic cry rather than a personal, individual thing like I got dumped or I can't, I don't have this, and then we all get worried. Those are, for me, the evidence that Rinpoche's life was very much like Rinpoche, just for the sake of sentient beings. His bodhicitta, his kindness, his compassion was evident in his daily life. Rinpoche's anecdotes you can read from Rinpoche's biography. Most of things that I've heard have been put in there, so there's not much sense in repeating it to you. But I thought I should let you know that these teachers, their main setting was bodhicitta, the welfare of all sentient beings. And that was the reason why I think my teachers, even somebody like Everything Kizonji, who had done so many retreats, I would say he probably shouldn't need to do his daily practices. But he was up early in the morning. The first time I had the fortune of sleeping in Rinpoche's room was very, very revealing to me. Rinpoche was receiving people until about 10 o'clock at night. And by 11, he was in bed, so I also went to bed with few attendees on the floor. And then around 2 o'clock in the morning, I could hear Rinpoche's mala clicking. At first, I thought it must be dawn, it must be time to get up. I quickly got up the noise, sleeping back, and Rinpoche motions saying, go back to bed. But that was every day. From 2 o'clock in the morning until about 9. He was doing his, I suppose, between brackets, personal practice. But I know that it wasn't personal practice. Everything he did was for the sake of other sentient beings. So I'm sure that these activities that my teachers kindly manifested, at least for my benefit, were the result of texts like the words of a perfect teacher. They knew the words of a perfect teacher inside out. That was what they mainly taught. As somebody said, it was like the Bible. But I'm not so sure that's a good example. I don't know how many people read the Bible. Judging by how people who are supposed to read the Bible conduct themselves, I don't think that they read the Bible at all. So I'm not so sure that I could say that this was their Bible. But it was their way of living. This is how they lived, how they manifested during the day. Just in the same way as we can recognize somebody by the way they dress. If somebody's been long enough in a particular part of the world, they start to dress and even look like those people. Asians who have lived in Sydney long enough will develop not only the Australian drawl, but even the way they dress. Will realize that must be somebody from Australia. And somebody who's been in New York has the same thing. Somebody who's been in France has the same thing. Likewise, these teachers had that particular setting that we could recognize in them. What is that basic setting? So, first question I think one could ask is, why are we interested? Why are we interested interested in the Buddha's teachings? Why do we wear this? I think most of you have this. Sometimes this is a very, very helpful, what is it called? Paraphernalia. Sometimes this is a very helpful thing to hide behind. Sometimes just seeing it makes you feel guilty. Sometimes having it makes you feel you fit in. But who knows whether we're interested in the Buddha's teachings, Bhadramitya? Are we? This Bhadramitya's biography, how is it different from Snow White for us? Some of you might have felt moved by Kanyarumitya's story. How different is it from Cinderella? We read those fairy tales, and then we go to bed, and when once in a while we hear certain stories like that, we feel worked up. We feel upset on their behalf. Something you hear on social media. And then after that, what happens? Go back to our usual settings. Go back home. Our cat is not looking at me as usual, so we feel upset. Husband and wife left the shoe in the wrong direction. So terrible. So after reading Bhadramitya's biography, after reading Words from a Perfect Teacher, what is the difference? I'm not saying that there's no difference between those two. In themselves, I'm not saying there's no difference. But in terms of its effect on us, in terms of its becoming part of our life, what's the difference? If we allow it to make a difference, then it is uncomfortable. Truth is very, very inconvenient. I think, what is it, that guy, Al Gore, he really, really coined it well. Inconvenient truth. It's uncomfortable. To be inspired, first part is very pleasant. after the honeymoon period, then it's boring. I think marriage really actually starts many, many years afterwards. You know, the word Dharma in Tibetan is Chu. For sure.
Chu.
Actually, it means to modify the word Chu. But it gets lost in translation. We call it spirituality. That's very difficult. It's very difficult to translate the Buddha's teaching, the concept, into any language with a theistic background. Practicing Chu is like going to therapist. Have you heard of something called rolfing? Called rolfing. It's a treatment that treats aphasia. Is it pleasant? It is the most unpleasant treatment you can get because it is treating something. Any kind of treatment that we seek, unless we're not sick. If we're not sick and seeking treatment, then we have another kind of sickness. Seeking any kind of treatment suggests that we have something that requires treatment. Basically, that we're a patient. We're not ticking properly. There's something not ticking in a healthy way. Changing that, treating that, that is the idea of Dharma. In Tibetan, Chu. We use this term Chu. Chu means treatment. Dru is to accomplish. So practicing the Dharma, Chu, has this idea of becoming cured or acquiring, accomplishing, being cured, being healthy. So practicing the Dharma is not necessarily going to be easy. However beautiful Padurama's life is, becoming Padurama for us is not going to be a walk in the park. If we're serious about it, then we really need to address this. Otherwise, we will be sorely disappointed sooner or later. You know, there are many young people who want to become heroes, glorified heroes. Many of these young men and women come back after combat with PTSD, if they do come back. That's possible with practice too, with the Dharma as well. Because we have glorified it too much without being conscious or aware of what goes into practicing. See, that is why when the Buddha taught, he was so honest. He wasn't selling, the pleasures of the heavens in the beginning. He started by saying, there is suffering. Suffering is caused. You can stop it. Search for the cause and stop it. That is something that we really have to remember if we are interested in the words of my beloved teaching. practices. So, the best way, for example, of going to on an expedition, on an exploration or conduct is by knowing the state of affairs, how things are, who we're going to combat with, what we're going to work with. That's why the Buddha said there is suffering, there is cause of suffering. And for us, in terms of practicing Dharma, we have to really understand what it is that we're going to work with, who it is that we have to work with. Of course, it's no one else but us, our own mind, our own afflicted mental states that we have to work with. They don't stop just because we decide to practice. In fact, they're just going to continue as usual. So working with them, knowing who we're working with, what we're working with. That is actually what Worth and Perfect Teacher is about. So in that sense, what is it actually that we're working with? Of course, you all know what the Four Noble Truths are. The Words of a Perfect Teacher, it talks about refuge, bodhicitta, followed by Vajrasattva all the way to Yoga. And prior to that, there's something called a common preliminaries, like contemplating precious human life, impermanence, suffering of samsara, the law of cause and effect. And as you know, it is preceded by the mindset that we should have in order to do all these practices. And simple, we say the mindset has to be bodhicitta. When you hear mindset as bodhicitta, I don't think any of us sort of even raise our eyebrows thinking, oh, that's a difficult thing. We think, oh yeah, that's good, it's easy. I remember when I was receiving teachings from my teachers, they would spend almost 10% of their time reminding us of the right motivation. And I can't say for others, but I used to sort of almost, not completely, but switch off a little bit, sort of not so worried until I get the main juicy part. So, as a Dharma practitioner, interested in practicing the Dharma, or interested in following this treatment, what is it that we should treat ourselves with? What should be treated? What ailment should be treated? So Karen Buddha said that I should have some time for questions, but I'm going to make it into an interactive thing from this moment on. So, practicing Dharma. What is the Words of a Perfect Teacher meant to treat? For example, the preliminaries, the ordinary common preliminaries, the motivation. When I say motivation, what does it mean to you? If I say, let us work with the bodhicitta motivation, what do you feel? What do you understand? Anyone? What do you feel? Is anyone disturbed by it? Does anyone feel disturbed by the idea have to develop bodhicitta?
I feel like personally, I feel sort of.
I mean, it's so great with all these concepts of bodhicitta, intention setting, loving, others like yourself. But when I hear setting bodhicitta, right now, I feel stressful because the level of bodhicitta in my perception versus other people's perceptions and many other perceptions and projections is so vast. It's like almost, okay, bodhicitta, in what degree? In what area? What is my scope? Yeah. And
so, what is your scope? When you feel, okay, I'm going to give work with bodhicitta, what does it feel like?
First of all, honestly, is to be authentic with myself first. Like, how do I seriously feel? And then expressing that.
Yes. How does it feel?
Like what I said initially, stressful.
Stressful.
And then...
But why?
Because of perceptions.
Forget about what other people think.
Yes.
Forget about what other people say. What do you feel?
And then after that, acknowledging that, and then just as it is, relax. Because by being myself, then I can be of service to others. Without being authentic, then there's no way.
I'm a bit dubious.
Yes.
Of course, to bodhicitta, there is two aspects to it. The ultimate bodhicitta, which is beyond our concept, beyond our ordinary grasp of our mind. Even the relative, is not that easy. I think some who have past habit of practicing bodhicitta must have some ease in developing that. But for ordinary people like me, bodhicitta is not that easy. I'm not sure that literally the first part, motivation, that is bodhicitta, in Tibetan is gung hong. Hong is to rouse. Anything we do should be roused by something. The propelling force needs to be bodhicitta to do these practices. What is our propelling force? At this moment, for most of us ordinary people, our propelling force is called, survival instinct. And as far as survival instinct, it's mainly my survival instinct, not the survival of other sentient beings, that rouses me to do for us. Therefore, as long as that particular setting of the survival instinct is me, I don't think that the rousing quality that is necessary for this is quite yet there. But that's something that we need to do. That's something we need to set again and again. We have so many lifetimes of habits of doing a certain thing. Our mind is like a vine that has been twisting around. So to untwist it, it will take a long time. So that's why we have to keep repeating over and over again. That's why I feel that my teachers would repeat this every time, almost to the point that our ordinary ungrateful mind gets bored. But I think that discomfort, that boredness, is actually thanks to my teachers. That was an introduction to bodhicitta. It was making my mind uncomfortable. If it doesn't make it uncomfortable, if it doesn't make my ordinary survival instinct uncomfortable, there is no training. There is no changing. If we wish to change, then I think it has to be a little bit uncomfortable. It's not that everybody should become uncomfortable. It's due to past habits and actions of being a bodhisattva. It might come naturally. But for most of us, that survival instinct needs to be addressed. And what this survival instinct wants. For example, right now, while I'm sitting here, if somebody else puts their backpack on me, will my bodhicitta will be there thinking, oh, at least I am a vessel for somebody's backpack. Or if somebody sits, drinks this water of mine, and then, what do you call it, spits back on it. Where is my bodhicitta? At least if I notice that I don't have bodhicitta, that's a very good thing. But now I have figured out where I'm going to stop, what needs to be worked on. Similar to when the Buddha said, there is suffering. And to me, the Dharma is saying, there is ailment, treat it. So, bodhicitta, for most of us, it's something so beautiful, nice. Doesn't want to have love and compassion. Who doesn't want to have peace? Everybody does. But that love and peace, is that bodhicitta or not? That's a question that we have to keep asking ourselves again and again. Until a point comes where my survival instinct is no more an obstacle to the treatment. And I'm willingly changing, but then Dharma is starting to have effect.
One more question.
Stop.
Thank you, Rinpoche. So, being born in the Tibetan Buddhism family when I was young, and then having a really wonderful teacher who is basically my role model for bodhicitta, His Holiness Katoketse Rinpoche. And after he passed away, I have a lot of questions because, this whole entire system, our educational system, is against even like the tiniest arousal of bodhicitta. Students are being educated in a way in competition, in fear, a lot of insecurities, and talking about societal kind of, racial disharmony, racism, and also, food systems. Everything is against this, this really la-la land of arousing bodhicitta, being a Dharma practitioner. Yes, I meditate, but sometimes you really feel like slapping people in the face, even though you actually meditate and you practice Dharma, like being honestly truthful with myself, I am like that. And so, Rinpoche, how would you, in this world that is so filled with a lot of challenges and, being truthful itself, I find it so difficult. How would you practice?
It's so difficult. Not because of anyone else, but for me, just myself. If I could, I am now rather old, so it's very difficult to kick my own bottom. If I could, I would go behind me and give myself a good kick up my butt. But that's very difficult to do. So, it's true, there is influence from our environment. It's really like traveling on the road. There's signposts everywhere. Some signposts are clean, some not so clean. Some advertisings appealing, some not so much. Why do you think there's so many advertising billboards everywhere? Why is there signposts on the road? Actually, I don't have to follow all those signs. I just have to choose which ones to follow. If I'm going from one place to another place, I have to have a functioning GPS where the compass is working. That's all I need. A compass is the bodhicitta. On the Buddha's path to awakening, to full awakening, bodhicitta is the compass. To be free from samsara, realizing that samsara is something you want to be free from, that is the compass. So figuring out where the compass is, that's what it is. That's why it is to the very beginning of this text, the bodhicitta, the motivation. Pantarunshi talks about few different kinds of motivation. What do you call it? I don't remember, but anyway, the neutral motivation and non-conducive motivation, non-conducive to awakening, and motivation that is conducive to awakening. And from there, even if we have, forget about non-conducive, even neutral, like when they usually say, I was sitting there minding my business. That is not good enough on the path. You can't just sit there and mind your business. You have to take sides. But I want to become awakened. Bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta, is twofold. I want to become awakened for the sake of all sentient beings. These two things, they have to be present. Like in a compass, south and north has to be there. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So when we have these two-pronged things that is clear in my mind, almost annoyingly there. I wake up, it's there. Sleep, it's there. Usually it's not there. When it is there and we feel uncomfortable that we don't have that, then it's very good. That means that there is some treatment happening. So just thinking of bodhicitta and making your unfeeling, making our non-bodhicitta self uncomfortable, that is the beginning of practice. The thing is, the moment you practice bodhicitta, we would all love it that suddenly we have 1,000 armies and we can perform miracles. If it happened, great. If it doesn't, great even. Because if it happens and we become like what is Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, it's great. If it doesn't, right, and we don't feel uncomfortable, well, that means there's something wrong. So if I'm not fully awakened, or the Bodhisattva first believe like all the Bodhisattvas, and I am feeling uncomfortable practicing Bodhisattva, that means something is working. So as long as there's a little bit of effort, like if you're doing some weight training, you're lifting weight and you can feel weight. You have to make sure that the weight is suitable for you at this time. So lift little weight, like 1 kilo. You can feel the weight, and after about 20 times, 30 times, you can feel your muscles aching. That means something is happening. That means the muscles are growing. That is what we should feel when we're doing our practice. There is some change, modification happening. There is our old setting of self-centeredness, or non-conducive motivation that is non-conducive to awakening, and neutral motivation, they are losing space. They are being disturbed by the thought of becoming awakened for the sake of all sentience. Even if it is just an idea, it's uncomfortable for that habit of ours. That setting needs to be changed. How do we change it? There's no mystery about it. Do it again and again. That is why we call it Gom in Tibet. Gom. And when Gom is done, it's called Kon, which is the past tense of getting accustomed. So there's really not so much mystery to it. Just thinking, oh, I am going to do this for all sentient beings. At first, it's just a sound. It's difficult, it's annoying. But if we keep doing that, even just that concept is stirring up our mind. It's like putting milk, a drop of milk in a tea. It's starting to change the color. That's what we have to do. And whatever other things that you see, it's actually good that you notice those things that are an obstacle to you. The moment you keep noticing, it's like if you're going from here to Brisbane, at that point, anything that is not towards Brisbane, you will see them, but you don't have to follow it. You recognize, okay, this one says Melbourne, okay, not Brisbane, so don't follow it. But it doesn't mean, just because you're going to go to Brisbane, that entire map signpost in Sydney, in Australia, has to change. Because if that had been done, it would be very impractical. But that is why, in order to do that, in the past, masters like Milarepa went into a place where there's not many signposts. Now, for us, in our case, we are interested in the Dharma. We would like to practice. Will we become enlightened in one lifetime? It depends on our investment. If we want to become like Milarepa, then the investment is different. Doing occasionally here and there, and once in a while, one step forward, one step backward, it's fine. We're still accumulating so much merit. Sooner or later, I don't know, maybe years, aeons, we will definitely get in that. But in the one lifetime, that is again something we have to really see properly. If we want to become like Milarepa or Bhakti, then the conduct should be similar to that. But that doesn't mean that we're not able to practice. By practicing now and by engaging in the Dharma, we can definitely make sure that throughout our lifetimes, we will continue to practice. That's absolutely possible. But we cannot expect suddenly all the other signposts to disappear. So, bodhicitta, this mindset, this arousing mindset, should help us address our habitual survival instinct that is based, it is fear-based, to actually help us work with that, to overcome that. So with that GPS setting, with a compass setting, then what you do, the next part is, for example, the 4 common preliminaries: precious human life, then impermanence, then cause and effect, or the suffering of samsara can then cause and effect. These four are, with the compass set to awakening, then how should we value things? That's why precious human life comes in. How a precious human life is taught with 8 freedoms, 16 additional freedoms, 10 advantages. These are showing us certain criteria of how we need to uplift our value system, how we value our life. We have good values, what we call human rights, etc., etc. That's good. But that is not compatible with full awakening unless you do some, unless you can upgrade that, unless you can uplift that. For example, how we think our human life is precious. We live in a society where you have freedoms, you can go outside not being chased by wild animals. Oh yes, this is good. But is that enough for awakening? It's not. Then it has to be somewhere where you can actually practice. One of these 8 freedoms is not having a narrow mind. Basically, having an open enough mind who gets ready, for example, to explore bodhicitta, explore the Dharma. And so these things, when you think, oh, I want to practice, I can practice, I can understand, I can hear, I can see, I can read, I can contemplate. These are freedoms. When you do feel bad, you need to feel some joy. Just like, I don't know, what you're into. Are you into handbags? Mobile phones? Depends. For some, it'll be handbag. For some, for guys, it'll probably be the next tech thing. When you get it, you're almost excited. You're almost having an orgasm because you're so happy. That kind of joy should happen when you think, I can practice. Like I have before as I'm a perfect teacher. And you have it, you should feel so much joy. That kind of value towards Bhagavad. That is the actual idea of why we contemplate pressure in the mind. It should change our value system. But then, once that value system changes, what happens? But then our relation in the time and space has to change. That's why impermanence. How we relate to time has to be different. For example, what time is it now? It's 9:20. Do you have time? You have more time? See, just that when you say you have more time, we have no idea. When we think we have more time, like I can practice later, tomorrow, that is wrong relation to time. But contemplating impermanence should make us realize that every moment time is ticking. It's not going to wait for us. But time, watch, is not going to wait for us. So our relation to time has to change. And not only that, our relation to space, where we project ourselves, tomorrow, next life, we all project ourselves to some place. Where is that? Is that free from truth of suffering? When we think, where will we be in the future? What is it that we think? Possibly some Buddha field, possibly some heaven, etc. I'm sure that's kind of thing that most of us have in our mind. That is wrong relation to space. In terms of somebody who has this compass, who wants to get enlightened, it has to be beyond this cycle of existence. So our relation to space has to change. If that changes, then our relation to our conduct of the body, speech, and mind has to change. Because you can't simply think, okay, that is what I want, I'm entitled to this, it's going to happen. For something as simple as going to the toilet, you have to make some effort and go to the toilet and do it in the right spot and not on the side. So if shitting requires certain causes and conditions, training our body, speech, and mind, and it is without any doubt that awakening requires that we change our body, speech, and mind. How we conduct our body, actions, speech, mind, thoughts, that again has to be in tune with the comments, with the Bodhisattva. That's why these four thoughts are so important. Without these four thoughts, that is operational, whatever other practices you do beyond refuge, bodhicitta, mandala, power, Guru Yoga, and any other practices, it's like building on sand. The foundation's not there. So that is why this is called Words of My Perfect Teacher, showing us how to become like our teacher, how it actually leads us to Guru Yoga, to becoming the same as Guru. So this is it, more or less. I'm sorry I've been quite scattered in every direction, but I would like to thank all of you for being here, and thank Karen Monsieur for giving me this occasion to talk about my teachers and make my presentation of what I think before the preliminaries are. Thank you very much. And after the translation, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer a few. Thank you very much for translating, Kumehaitin. If there's no more questions, I'm going to pass the microphone to Karen. 10 seconds. Oh, okay.
It's okay.
Yes. Can you shout?
I can share.
Yes.
So, because we've been working for the self for so long, and now we're trying to practice the bodhicitta, think repelled by the bodhicitta, I'm concerned that there's a risk that the self will just sneak its way back in, and we end up working for the self again, even though we think we're working for the bodhicitta. So, what are some signs that it's genuinely, we're having some genuine little breakthroughs of working for the bodhicitta, so that we need that compass so that the real compass doesn't get confused. So some indicators.
What are the indicators that it is working?
Yeah, what are the indicators? That's a better way of saying it. Thank you. Yeah.
When it's usually when things are working out well, you develop bodhicitta and you think, oh, I'm becoming a really good bodhisattva. That means there's a little danger that I'm have taken over. And then again, sometimes also we might feel that it's really not working. And then we feel a little bit depressed, almost, anxious, panic. If you feel like giving up, then it's not working. If you feel, in spite of all of this, I'm going to keep going, then it means it's working. Working with our mind is not necessarily pleasant nor unpleasant. we're not working with it so that things are pleasant, so that things work well. If suddenly after Garbhu Bodhicitta, everybody loves you and puts you on a pedestal, that doesn't mean that bodhicitta is working. It just means that some positive karma of the past to keep you anchored to samsara might be opening up. So if at that time, it really depends what your
Recording
mind
in
is.
progress.
If you still think, okay, I still want to train my mind for the sake of both sentient beings, and I want to develop, but I am actually aroused by the wish to become awakened, or bringing awakening to all sentient beings, then I think that's what we can hope for. And then we need to make aspirations towards that, that our aspirations are mainly for that our wish is mainly for that. Aspirations. That is why, beautiful prayer of aspiration by Bodhisattva Samattabhadra is the king of aspirations. It's so beautiful, so vast. That's why it's important to make those kind of aspirations, because our ordinary survival instinct doesn't have those aspirations, especially the aspiration like by Jimmy Limba, where he makes these aspirations say, may I never have selfish thoughts. And if I do have selfish thoughts and I make selfish aspirations, may they be always sabotaged. That kind of aspiration, if we can end, I think those are the good things that we can do. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Namo Gurave Namo Buddhaya